Just as a general overview, this presentation will take part in about 3 sections. We're going to go back to the very beginning of this school year and talk about the work that we did at Superintendent's Conference Day, laying the foundation for the work we're going to do this school year. Jennifer Marren will speak to Sources of Strength program and as part of our social emotional learning initiatives at the building, as well as our collaborative efforts. We'll talk about collaborative efforts both in the PLC model as well as just best practice efforts that are happening behind the scenes. But before I do that, I just want to take a moment just to share with you and with everyone the appreciation I have for both Jennifer Marren and Eileen Scoville. It is an absolute privilege to work with these two and to be on this administrative team. I'm very lucky and I feel it every day, and I just wanted to say thank you for your commitment to Sutherland High School and to the support you provide to all of us every day, so thank you. When you walk into Southerland High School in the main lobby, the main entrance, there are a series of senior class photos, which is very impressive and it speaks to the legacy of the building. And you might notice that there is a lack of teacher photos in the hallway. So one of the first things that we talked about as a staff is actually taking a staff photo. When I presented that idea to the staff, they jumped all over it. It's from the very beginning of the school year. And then I spoke to PTSA, and they agreed to actually fund an annual photo for the staff. We'll update it, as well as a frame and inscription at the bottom that says, "The SHS faculty and staff welcomes you." So it's just a really nice compliment, and it says to anyone visiting the building that we as a staff work with the students, and there's a presence there for that we have on a day in and day out basis. So the Superintendent's Conference Day started the idea of that photo and bringing the staff together with a Compass Points activity, and there were a couple of activities that were designed to bring together and reinforce relationships around the building. So this Compass Points activity is actually a very interesting one. It has preferences of group work that are laid out, and the staff got together as a whole and took a look at those character traits and then did some self-reflection and chose one of the 4 to kind of go to. So, and in the 4, there are the 4 Compass Points. You have people who want to get their hands dirty and jump right into the work and get started and get things through. You have folks who consider everyone's feelings. So as a result of this effort, how will people respond, react? There are people who need to get the big picture before stepping forward. So those people who need to see the step back and just to have the overall objective. And then there's those people who need to get every detail as they're about to start a project. So we had a lot of fun actually talking about who we are as a staff and how we can complement each other's styles. And that what that looked like up until that point, and what it might look like in the future, so that when we're coming together and doing committee work, how we can draw out the strengths in the individuals within that committee, and then be most effective and productive and efficient in the work that we're doing. Another activity we did was thought questions, and that was, again, kind of self-reflection. We used kind of broader range questions for this, so that we just talked about our experiences and that sort of thing. The staff was around the room in groups of about 7, sitting at tables, about 14 groups of 7 each. And so they would have conversations with each thought question that was presented. And then we slowly narrowed that down to our high school experiences. We as individuals, how we, what we took away from our high school experiences, what we valued, what kind of stuck with us, what helped guide us into who we became. And then we juxtapose that against what we see in our students these days. So what are they experiencing? How is that similar and different to our personal experiences? And then we had more conversation, and which led to creating sort of a list, idea of what we wish or hope for our students as they navigate their way through Sutherland. And what that resulted in is what we call the Dear Student Project, so that the individual groups around the room created these posters that were essentially compilations of the ideas that the individual groups had. And we created these posters and brought them around the building. And I'm advancing to a slide that you might not have. It was added after Friday. This is just an example of the different types of posters that were created by the individual groups, and then posted around the building for the students to enjoy, to reflect on. We chose areas that students kind of congregate or kind of walk through often. And the day that we actually rolled this out, I put an announcement. I made an announcement to the student body about what those posters were and how it was a reflection of really sincere thoughts presented by the faculty. So you'll see that in this set of examples, there are a few different presentations that were utilized. But an interesting thing is that when you look at all the posters, all 14 of them, there are a lot of common themes. So they look different, but they kind of have the same themes. And there was one that stood out more than any other. I put it at the top of the list here, and is that the staff desperately wanted the students to enjoy and value their learning. Not surprising, educators actually built the lists. And then the rest of the themes were pretty well balanced and kind of mentioned in different ways, but had the same ideas. We wanted our students to do their best work and to be very proud of it, and that we want our students to understand that it's okay to make mistakes. We want to create environments where they'll take risks and then learn from those mistakes. It's part of the learning process. We want our students to make the most of their high school experience, and that's everything from academics to sports to arts, all the club activities, and just enjoying the social aspect of being a student. We want them to pursue their interests wholeheartedly, give 110% to everything that they do, and to succeed, and to know that no matter where they are in that process, that we're going to be there to support them, and no matter how difficult things seem or how easy they seem, we're always going to have a presence and be there for them. And we also want them to be empathetic and show support for their peers and for others, and actually for everyone around the building. I've spoken to a couple larger student groups, and I remind them that on any given day we might have around 1,100, 1,200 people in the building, and we have that many opportunities to support each other and to lean on each other throughout our days. So we took that information, those common themes, and then student character traits that support those themes, and we've talked about it and processed it quite a bit since the beginning of the school year. We've brought it to faculty meetings. ILT, a subgroup from ILT was actually created to talk about what we might do with this information and how we might move forward. And it came down to three kind of questions that we were asking ourselves. And one is that we're just trying to identify the kinds of things we're already doing in the building. That's everybody in the building, and how we might be able to complement those efforts. And the best use of our resources, and that's in the classroom, maybe during the delivery of instruction, and maybe the teleprompters around the building. How do we pull out some of the key messages and actually put those up and rotate through them for students to see? And then how we might give students a voice in the process, and how we might be able to increase communication between faculty and the students, so that that led to a conversation about the different clubs and organizations, the SEL initiatives that we have in the building, and maybe how we introduce this idea to students so they might be able to present ideas to the staff, and then we can have an ongoing dialogue, which is how we led to the sources of strength conversation. And Jennifer Marren will speak to that a little bit now.
I'd like to thank Mark and the Board of Education for giving me this opportunity to speak about a program that I am so passionate about. The mission of the Sources of Strength program is to prevent suicide by increasing help-seeking behaviors and promoting connections between peers, our students, and caring adults. The pictures you see now are of our Sutherland peer leaders. They represent all the diverse student groups we have at Southerland. These student leaders are charged with leveraging their social influence in culture change campaigns using strength-based messages to impact multiple issues that include suicide prevention. I just love looking at that slide, those faces. Our latest campaign builds on the ideas behind Dear Student, as it is a trusted adults campaign. So a trusted adult is defined as someone that the students can go to if they or a friend are in trouble. Some of our Sources of Strength peer leaders presented this idea at our January faculty meeting. They were terrified, but they did an awesome job. The campaign will focus on having students name and thank a trusted adult in our building. The peer leaders are meeting next week to finalize plans for the campaign, so stay tuned. It should be amazing. This Trusted Adult campaign dovetails perfectly with the themes that emerged from the Dear Student activity and the overarching idea that we, the adults at Southerland, care deeply about all of our students. We as a team are so grateful to have Sources of Strength at Southerland, and thank the Board of Education, the Director of Student Services, Dr. Von Brogan, and Superintendent Pirro for making it possible. Speaking personally, it is a privilege to coordinate this program. Thank you.
So there are a lot of things happening behind the scenes at Sutherland, and these are efforts that fall into the category of PLC and other, just general collaborations. And this is feedback from the staff so that we can provide you at least an example or a few examples of the kinds of things that are going on. When I asked for feedback from the entire staff, I ended up with pages and pages of it was phenomenal of feedback, and I just thought maybe give you an example of a few of them. Things like curriculum writing. So there are specific courses where curriculum writing continues. We have at least one new course, AP World History, where the faculty, in addition to working their day, will get together on a daily basis and look at how things are going and write and rewrite their curriculum. Teachers have created and implemented project-based learning experiences, and I can think of one in biology, and this is essentially a step aside from traditional assessments or activities for students, so they're actually creating something as a result of their knowledge or newly found knowledge. Teachers are sharing materials, including worksheets, review packets, and rubrics to assess the student work in different ways and get a better understanding of how students are thinking and working through their projects. The pacing of instruction is the kind of thing that becomes aligned kind of naturally with these other efforts that are happening, but there is a very cognizant effort on the part of the teachers so that they understand where students need extra time or maybe even less time in order to get through their learning. Formative and summative assessment work has been going on for a long time, and the reason why I bring this one up is because of a recent example of formative assessment, a common formative assessment in physics, where the teacher was essentially took a few lessons, boiled it down to a few questions, and created those questions in a software that allowed students to fill in these bubble sheets and then have those scanned into a program that immediately put the feedback up for the teacher to see and for all the students to see in terms of what they knew and where they were struggling. And then it kind of rerouted the instruction right on the fly, which was just phenomenal. And then performance assessments, again, it's stepping aside from traditional paper and pencil kind of assessments, allowing students to get their hands dirty a little bit and create something in their learning. Outside of the classroom, students, there are support services alignment between the high schools. Our speech-language pathologists working together to figure out best ways to revamp their services and how to best serve the needs of their students. Between the high schools also, we have the college planning materials being put together by counseling teams, and again, it's just something that they're looking at and planning together. Instructional support team at Sutherland High School has been very successful for a very long time, but still just checking in on their best practices. Recently decided that students would have one objective to focus on at a time, and then they're tracking the success of that objective. And then AIS at the high school is a relatively new concept in math especially, so we're looking at the different data points that we have for students to best understand where their gaps are in their learning, and then how to best put them together and provide services in a way that's focused on their needs. Oh, and I put the picture there just to remind myself to share with you that this was the feedback, and a lot of feedback came from the faculty. So in essence, this entire presentation was put together by the entire building, and I'm very appreciative to them for that. And I also need to add that Eileen Scoville, while she's not participating in the presentation today, had everything to do with what you're seeing and hearing this evening. So at the end of last week, some people, a variety of people came to me knowing that we'd have this presentation and kind of were asking about how things were going and the kinds of things we're going to talk about. And I talked about the academic rigor and the collaborative efforts and those sorts of things. And my administrative assistant, Tina Carpenter, she said, well, you're going to mention how much fun we have? And I said, well, I didn't prepare a slide about fun, but I could mention it. I said, well, she got a hold of Aaron Brady, the AV guy at our building, and they quickly put together. I give them complete credit for this next slide. It's also not included in the previous packet, but this is just as our fun slide.
You're going off script, Mark.
I love it. I love Southerland. This is a great school. We always come out. We turned it out.
So just an overview of the work that's going on and the fun we're having at Sutherland High School. Thank you very much.
That was great.
Thanks, Mark. That was fantastic. Does anyone from the board have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I thought it was great, the project you did. We were getting everybody's perspective, looking back to high school, and the posters that you put up around the building with the note to the students. What kind of feedback did you get from the students on those posters?
They were awkwardly curious at first about what they saw in the building, but it was the only. Actually, what stands out to me was that they could not at all make the connection between what we experienced maybe 30 years ago in high school, 20, 30 years ago, and what they're experiencing. And they very much appreciated the fact that they were sharing, and really didn't have much more to add to it than that. Yeah.
Could students write responses or write notes on there, and have they?
They're being very respectful. Those posters haven't touched them at all. It's pretty amazing, actually. And I even took the time, a couple of us took the time to actually go around the building and switch the location of some of the posters, so just to mix them up, just to see what would happen. But it was actually more, it looks like more the formal effort that we're making in order to encourage them to communicate back is going to be the way to go for that.
I just had a quick question. In terms of the sources of strength, how many students are participating in that?
So the goal of any Sources of Strength program is 10% kind of representation in the student population. So we are at about 70 at Sutherland. So and we've had all of those students have been trained by a national trainer between last year and this year. I'm going to talk to the adult advisors. So adult advisors, we meet separate, and then the peer leaders kind of are in charge of it. But probably as adult advisors, we'll talk about getting the more ninth graders involved, but also maybe a preview or reach out to eighth graders. But that'll all be worked out with the peer advisors, because then the goal is going to be between 90 and 100 students, and it kind of stays there. So, picture the cafeteria, and you walk through it, and your goal is to kind of have in that group, there's someone from that Sources of Strength making a connection to those students.
And I want to just thank all of you for bringing Sources of Strength to the school. And soon I'll be meeting with Mark and Carl because it's a program at both Sutherland and Mendon. But through my student advisory committee, one of the things which is fascinating from all 16 students, 8 from Sutherland and 8 from Mendon, place a real high value on Sources of Strength and have talked about how it's made a difference in the buildings. They've also talked about, and some of our goals are around, we had one category around bullying and how to treat each other, and they all wanted to process everything through Sources of Strength. And so the kids really are finding a real significant value. And that's what was shared with me about not only what's happening in the buildings, but is there a way to also bring sources of strength in Mendon and Sutherland together and look at the best practices for each building. So it's really getting a lot of accolades. And while you hate to say this, it's actually worked. When we talk about suicide and suicide prevention, we've actually been able to prevent something because of sources of strength. So hats off to all of you, and Mark and Eileen and Jen, thank you for all you do at Sutherland. It's a great place.
Thank you.